So far, Kiro has the worst user experience that I've seen of any tool. One of the challenges is that most people are, or most companies, processes, setups are average or below. And if the multiplier only returns a positive result for those above average, most people are going to suffer.
I think it's one of the things like AI, basically, where you can't just bolt a tool on existing workflows, or you really need to rethink the way you have been working.
Taking public transportation for one stop sucks, right? You can't get out your phone, you can't, start reading a book. It's too short. And I feel like this is what the experience a lot of the models give you.
The LLMs are not able to reason about the future or what could happen. But what I think LLM are pretty good at is to find the needle in the haystack. It is pretty good at finding a potential root cause for problems. Hey, Romain, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for inviting me on to do this episode.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining me, and welcome to the AWS Developers Podcast. I'm really happy to have you. I have been postponing this recording for a few times now, so very sorry about that. Many things came up last time. I lost my voice, and and this morning I had also a problem with my throat. I said no, not again. But I'm glad we are here today and we can record this.
Maybe that was the universe warning your audience about what was going to come in this episode.
Probably, yeah, because when we met, I think it was 2 months ago, when we started to discuss about the topic we could discuss in this podcast. You were developing some thoughts about AI and LLMs, and you were basically telling me that you would have a contrarian stance. So I think it's interesting for us. I think we are going to talk about. Critical thinking, and I think part of that is also to listen to those contrarian voice and different opinions, and not jump necessarily on everything that we see on social media. So I think it's interesting.
For sure. I think there is always this question of whether or not what we see out there is representative of the entire space, or whether or not it is just the small bubble that is loudest. Or there's a whole group of people that are somehow involved and aren't sort of interacting with the technology that we have available in the same way. But because they're not part of our network, or they don't post on social media, we don't even know what their perspectives are.
Yeah, correct. So that's interesting. But let's start with intros. Maybe would you like to introduce yourself?
I can certainly try. I had to think for a moment what I actually was going to say here, but I think I've narrowed it down to I'm the CTO at Authress, which provides login and access control. For AWS viewers, I like to say it's a better version of Cognito, but maybe that's not the entire truth. And I'm the host of the Adventures in DevOps podcast, where we host CTOs, AWS heroes, and principal engineers, and we talk about interesting stories from their experiences.
Perfect. So very much aligned with what we're trying to do here. So it's good. And I encourage everyone to follow you on your show as well. So I will add the link to you to the show notes. And yeah, you had not necessarily people from the AWS community. I mean, you had Cassidy Williams recently. She's a developer advocate at GitHub, or she has a senior director title or whatever.
Yeah, she's the senior director of DevRel at GitHub now, which basically means she gets to be stressed both during the day and when she gets home, whenever there's a post on social media.
Yeah, I know. I have been in her shoes not long time ago. But I saw her on stage this week at Ignite. So it's cool. Good for her. It's cool. All right. So cool. You are a CTO at Authress. Do you want to give us more details about that? Besides, it's a better version of Cognito.
I just say, we generate JWTs for our customers' applications, but honestly, we've picked the niche of B2B. So it's not just about standing up applications. very fast, like we know LLMs are trained to do. But when you have a bigger platform or something more complex and you have to handle authorization or access control through multiple different microservices or different user personas, you can imagine the complexity of AWS IAM, and then just turn that inside out and provide that as really a first class application component is really where we focused a lot.
Cool. All right. Perfect. And you are based in Switzerland.
Most importantly, I'm my accent usually gives it away. I'm originally an American, but I've been in Switzerland for almost a decade, and I don't think anyone can convince me to go anywhere else at this point.
Good. All right. Perfect. All right. So let's discuss now about some contrarian ideas. Um, you wanted to give me a point of view on Kiro. So let's start with this, maybe.
You know, I have tried using Kiro, and I've used Claude Code and some of the other ones. And honestly, there's a couple of different aspects with any tool you're utilizing. And the one thing that I keep coming back to is, what does a mature software solution look like when you feed it into a software development pipeline or workflow? And how does a tool interact with that? And so far, Kiro has the worst user experience that I've seen of any tool, but it has the best sort of internal working about how it figures stuff out. So I feel very much more empowered when I'm using it, and I feel like more accurate results. But things like it crashing all the time is such a challenge to not be incredible. It's like, the wheel spinning on your CI/CD platform for a while before it's just like fail at the end with no results.
Okay. So that's interesting. Kiro ID or Kiro CLI?
I use the IDE, and I'm sure I'm going to get some hate for this. I am not like a Vim user, so first class GUIs for me all the way.
Okay. Good. So, and you are working on Mac or
I'm
Windows?
on Linux, so maybe that's the
On
source of
Linux.
all the problems. I this is more hate coming at me for sure. I use a flavor of Ubuntu called Xubuntu, which is the XFCE GUI, which is slimmed down, very thin, just enough to support a graphical user interface, but it's unfortunately Ubuntu under the hood.
Okay. Unfortunately. Well,
Well, there's like a huge history of controversy with Canonical, right? Like whether they went the Microsoft ads in your application start terminal before Microsoft even did it. The whole software updater discovery platform from Canonical started introducing. I'm not going to say they're ads, but they're sort of like ads. Luckily, I never really used it. I'm a straight like find the package and install it with aptitude, and you're good to go.
okay. So it's a good start indeed into contrarian space. Now, good. Okay. So, okay, cool. So I will raise the feedback to our sales team about your distribution, because I've not heard from customers about this, but it may happen definitely. So I trust you on this.
I think the number one thing is like, if we're going to do the feedback thing, multi tabs, like if you have multiple sessions running at the same time, switching between them tends to get stuck. And the other one is, and I mean, I don't care about that. Like I'll still use a product even if it's crashing all the time. So, maybe that's not super important. But I will say, number one thing is, when a agent takes work that you've discussed that's in a spec and it jobs it off to sub agents, those sub agents will have opinions about how to do stuff based off of the system, the prompt that was passed to it. However, often that agent starts doing something incredibly wrong that you have no control over. And if you can stop that agent and you can be like, what's going on? Let's do it differently. But the primary agent doesn't understand the sub agent context. So it can't even tell you why the sub agent was doing it in a particular way. And sometimes it would be like making commits. The biggest one that I see often is git stash. It will say, I want to do git stash. And I'm like, I don't know what you're trying to do at this moment, but that could not be more wrong.
Okay. Good. So I think it goes back to one of the topics you addressed in a recent discussion that I listened on your podcast, with this what is about giving access to your environment to agents. So how do you
Uh,
customize your agents to or how do you sandbox your agents?
yeah.
So
I'm using a dedicated machine, but I think realistically, it doesn't really matter a lot because at some point we're going to have to give full access to an agent in order to do what it needs to do, and there's no good way of managing permissions or whatnot. I feel like everyone's gotten stuck in the abyss of agent asks for action, you click approve, and then another action, you click approve. So much so that people have like designed like physical wearable apps that just ping you and you click a button on your watch or whatever to say, approve this action. And it's very much reminiscent of what was old is new again. We used to have like merge request queues with QA engineers or release engineers who would stand up and say, I approve this, push to production. They weren't technical. They had no experience on what was even going on in the earth, let alone even reviewed the code change. So, I mean, it's like, what is the value of that really? And so you very quickly get to the Claude Code version of dash dash live dangerously. And I think when you go down that route, you start to have to question certain things like, well, how do we make sure that there isn't going to be a problem in place? And we're back to, well, it was always a problem with human development. It doesn't change when we switch to a different world. All those things that were still relevant are still necessary, even when we switch what tools we're using. And I think it's because we have figured out, we've optimized a lot of things when it comes to knowledge management, knowledge work, and software development in general.
So I have experienced great QA engineers actually who were looking at the code and specifically when I was working for Riverbed, it was so we had networking appliances, that's stuff that you put on the network. So if they crash, that impact your customers. So QA was pretty important. So I remember some really good sessions with them. But I get your point. The thing is that what I see with the customers I work with is that usually um, they specifically, I mean, going back to your sub agent example, I I use custom agents, so I define exactly what they have access to and the tools that they have access to. So I don't have to accept, and they have to work within the context and so they will not use a Git command because only one agent has access to Git to do that. So the others they have access to just you can compile, yes, in your sandbox, in your containers and so on. So I think we are still very much in the exploration phase.
I wonder if that may be even an understatement. Like there are so many companies out there. Well, maybe just to put this in perspective, there's a well-known hosting platform technology that still claims that 50% of the internet runs on it. Now, I don't know how trustworthy we can respect metrics from a particular company that has every reason to try to convince people to use it, that's the WordPress ecosystem. That's if that's really running 50% of the tech. They're not using AI. They're not using LLMs or agents or even maybe a well-defined software development process or even hiring software engineers. And that's 50% of the world. And so when we look at the ecosystem that is using these tools, I think we get stuck in this bubble of if we're using one of them, we see other people who are using them, and we're comparing ourselves against them. It's like Olympic, world class, world record holder sprinters who are comparing themselves against other sprinters. Even if you don't make the Olympics, you look on the screen, on the TV, and you see those people doing that thing. You're like, well, I could be doing that thing too, or maybe I'm not that good. But compared to the rest of the population, most people are not using any sort of LLM in their work environment, or even doing software development in a reliable, straightforward way in the first place. I was at a conference a couple months ago, and I asked in the room how many people know what DORA metrics are. Not like, are you tracking, but know what they are. And only 2 people out of like 50 put their hand up. And I'm like, really? Like, that's really surprising to me.
Like a developer conference?
Yeah, for sure. It's this Randall Munroe of XKCD has this one comic about the bias of experts, where he's talking about like, oh yeah, we know everything there is to know about rocks, and we believe most people don't know anything about rocks, but at least they know the formulas for some silicates and feldspars. And I'm like, I don't know what a silicate or a feldspar is. And so it's this aspect where when we're an expert in an area, we grossly overestimate what non-experts even understand to a ridiculous degree. And I think this is one of them.
True. Equally, I think, I mean, since we are on the contrarian space, equally, I think in the age of social media influencers and also AI giving all the answers, I think many people claim to be experts where they don't have the depth and nor the expertise nor the experience that goes with it. So everyone claimed to be an expert in 2 days. We saw that for on many topics, like in during COVID, for example, was another one.
I think we saw this, and anyone can actually just flip back in the history pages and see when the pandemic happened, many companies were standing up and saying, we know how to do remote work correctly. And then as soon as the pandemic was over, they're all like back to work for everyone. And if you looked at the history of those companies, and I'm going to point them out here, Slack and Zoom are the top two culprits here. They didn't have a remote working environment. They didn't even have a hybrid one. Pandemic happens. They said, we know how to do this. We have the tools for it. Everyone starts using them. Then pandemic is over. They're like, everyone back to work. Whatever you're doing, it's over. And I'm like, do your tools not work? Like, are you like, because that's the obvious conclusion.
Yeah, but I think it's one of the things like AI, basically, where you can't just bolt a tool on existing workflows, or you really need to rethink the way you have been working. So same for remote. I mean, if you expect the same, everyone to follow the same processes that you have had in on premises or on sites, and have the same interaction, I mean, then it's not going to change. I mean, Slack or Zoom or any other tools or Chime. Let's talk about Chime.
Are you
No,
allowed, are you allowed to talk about the deprecated public service or the internal private API that some platforms out there are utilizing? So I think there's a couple of interesting things here, for sure. And I'm not sure what the best way of putting this is realistically. There's the technology that we have in front of us, and the DORA report from the previous year suggests that LLMs are a multiplier, arguing that's just like any other tool. Now, one of the challenges is that most people are, or most companies, processes, setups are average or below. And if the multiplier only returns a positive result for those above average, most people are going to suffer. I think it's the same thing with microservices in a way. And this is where I get to throw in a controversial standpoint. If you were like microservices are the best thing ever. There's no better alternative. It's almost never correct to do a different way. But if you can do microservices wrong, and I think a lot of people understand the word microservices to mean something different than what it actually started out as. So something's like, oh, microservices are the worst thing ever. And if you dive into it, you understand they aren't talking about microservices being bad. They're talking about some process within their company being problematic, or some architecture or technology they built or dependency they have or business process. That's an issue. And I think the same goes elsewhere. If you just apply a multiplier to your existing thing, it for sure will be an issue. Some people will skate by because they were doing the right thing all along, but most of them, I think, will run into a heavily problematic situation. And it's especially made worse if the tool isn't designed well to help those that aren't in the top 10% or 20% be effective. So it is a pit of failure, and it's a multiplier. Those two things do not end well.
indeed, indeed. So that reminds me of in France we have those special grad schools to get into the Ivy League schools, and he had this theory where he was calling the elastic. Whatever he was calling it elastic. So basically, it was so when he was graduating our work or giving grades to our work, he was using this elastic. So if you were on the average, you would not move, but if you were just below the average, then it will push you down.
Yeah,
And
it's like a
if you were up, it will push you up in the scores. So and that's what exactly what happens in with AI or any tools like microservices, because because if you are on the top, yes, you are going to be accelerated. And we see great stories from many big tech companies that are really benefiting a lot. Um, or telling us. But at least I see some good stories inside of Amazon. But some are suffering, and the DORA. I think in the latest DORA report that was released this week, they have some good examples of AI being an amplifier of your problems, and where it can really accelerate your error rates and drops and all the rework that you have to do because you are not catching up quickly, and then your pipeline is not ready for supporting all of that. So it can be a big
Yeah,
mess.
I don't know if grading ever on a curve was a smart thing that schools decided to do. But with I think one of the challenges with a lot of the LLMs and the tooling is that you don't actually know that you're in the top 10 or 20%, right? It's a very uh, perceived or something that you observe, and you don't know if that's the reality, right? Like, oh, we have these metrics, it says that we do this great or we're making a lot of money. Those aren't necessarily reflective of the reality after starting to use the tool. So just because your company is doing great right now, or you think you have great processes, you should be able to measure after adding LLMs, if it really is a multiplier, how great your processes were. Problem is, after finding out, well, first of all, a lot of companies aren't measuring effectively. They're measuring tokens, like token maxing is as a result, right? You get what you measure, or they're just praying that it will work out and then taking the result. And very few of them are willing to challenge their core identity that is enshrined in the processes that they have and go back and say, well, if our result is poor, it must be because everything that we thought about how we do software development was wrong, and we should take a real look at that. And I don't think they're doing it.
Yeah. So what have you changed on your side? I mean, anything changed? I mean, you are still using Kiro despite the bugs and the instability that you are.
Yeah.
So I guess you are getting some benefit out of it.
Well, there's the thing. Like, it's the question of is like, is it an addiction at this point? So, and if it is, like, you can't really stop. So, I'd rather not use the fact that someone's using it or that I'm using it as justification that is definitely good. I do think that there is an aspect that it's difficult to measure. I will say I can share some facts. Uh, One of the facts is I think Kiro is cheaper than other IDEs out there from a pricing standpoint. So if there's a comparison, you got to go with that. Also, I don't know if this is a secret that I'm not supposed to share, but AWS credits pay for Kiro. So you get even better, honestly, from that standpoint. I think there is something that makes a lot of sense as like I see it when using the tool, and it works well on a physical machine. But when I'm traveling around, I tend to go and swap on my phone to uh, Claude Code or through the app, because there isn't really a digital alternative. And then I have to maintain this sort of context of like, which things am I working on my computer and which things am I working on through my phone or through Claude Code, and then deal with the consequences of that. And the tools don't all work great together. So that's highly problematic. Like, Cloud Code only works with GitHub, but we use GitLab for almost everything. So we have to decide, is this going to be open source? And if it is it open source on GitHub? And I feel like it's forcing you into an ecosystem that doesn't necessarily align with everything that you've identified. The other thing is, I think what a lot of people jump on is this train of, how do you make sure that the mistakes that an agent or an IDE or an LLM make, that it doesn't make it in the future? And for me, it's totally a ritual, like complete superstition. This thing happened, so I predict it was because of this, and then maybe we can add a skill or something to the process to make it happen. Now, the thing about that is, there's no way of knowing. And I know a lot of people are like, well, you could get the agent to summarize what the mistake was that it made, and maybe you can get it to also generate the skill. And I'm like, that's just like turtles all the way down, right? It doesn't know why it made the mistake. Like, maybe it can like expose something of a guess. Is that guess accurate? Almost impossible to say. And then you're enshrining that in your skills or your steering documents in Kiro. I don't know. Sometimes it feels good. Sometimes it feels like you're able to get stuff done. What I will say is, I hate the notion of this word productivity, which I've talked about a lot historically. And It doesn't. I think that word doesn't mean anything. So I can say how I see changes for me, though, concretely, which is I am very much a town planner in the Simon Wardley breakdown of pioneers, settlers, and town planners. Like, what sort of
Okay.
work do you like doing? So I like optimizing. I talk a lot about reliability and whatnot. This allows me to switch from that mode of delivering to the working on greenfield projects, building new things. I don't get in my head about starting it and feeling like it already has to be a polished solution before I can work on it. That being said, I have like 10 projects now in the middle. I'm not doing agile. I'm making every mistake that waterfall makes, and I'm not getting anywhere. So, was that was that a plus? Hard to say.
All right. Cool. So basically, I'm trying to summarize what you said. So you're playing with Kiro. So one feature request, if I capture that well, is to handle handoff between devices. So you have a consistent experience across many devices, and you can work on.
It's certainly possible. I think there's a lot of black box stuff going on with Kiro because you're not using the IDE from VS Code, so it's not a plugin there. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of different things, and it's hard to know which things are better to change. Or like, have I been doing software development wrong my whole life, and I have to change how I'm doing it? And it's very difficult to compare what I think is natural from a software development process to what these IDEs or LLMs or agent systems are doing. What I did realize is that when you sign up to take an IDE or even an LLM from a company, you're not just getting their model, you're getting their whole vision of how software development is supposed to work. And so, one question we can have is, do large companies do software development correctly? And I don't think we have a good metric to say, yes, they do. I mean, maybe they do business correctly. That may justify why they're large. But do they do software correctly? I think there's lots of people who work at one large tech company and would point fingers at each other at other large tech companies who argue that no, how they do it at that other company is wrong. And they all say that, right?
I don't know. I mean, I think we have different point of views. Clearly,
Uh-huh.
clearly, the model between Amazon and Google is very different. So we don't have a necessary model. Doesn't mean that the SRE model is not correct. And it's not. It's just not our philosophy and the way we have decided to work. So I
Yeah.
don't believe that we can say that it's not good.
Mm.
But let's dive deeper on Kiro. The Is that the spec-driven development workflow that because it's very opinionated? Is that something that you use or you don't like to use, or
I found like there's something about the spec-based flow which feels better as far as it working goes because I can very quickly get out of the mode of having to wait for the agent responses. It's like taking public transportation for one stop sucks, right? You can't get out your phone, you can't, start reading a book. It's too short. And I feel like this is what the experience a lot of the models give you. But with the spec-based development in Kiro, it's like taking a long plane flight where you can once you get done, you can go away, have it work, and then come back later. And I feel like being clear about which mode you're in, either instant responses or doing the long-term spec thing, is really, really helpful from a standpoint of doing the software development, which is one of the things I like much more than the other coding agents.
but why are you stuck in the middle of 10 project? Is that because AI is because you have to wait on AI and so you start new stuff and then you paralyze and or because you it gives you more ideas or more opportunities because you think that you have the ability to do more to avoid any productivity stuff.
I think the way the models exist, the way the tools really operate, is there is an encouragement of, like I said, it's an addiction, and you go back and you want to do something. If you change the way you operate, where now whenever you get in a vehicle or you go walk somewhere, you're constantly opening your phone, like it's. I think the companies have optimized for a TikTok experience for software engineers, and that's what you're getting. You're going back and you're doing something, and the question is, what can I do here? Except you realize there's only so many things that you can do with the current setup. You need to maybe there's blockers that don't exist because of software engineering. Development was never a bottleneck as far as the whole lifetime of software development. Testing was never the bottleneck, and there's a lot more on top of that. Well, yeah, I like that. I like the head shake there.
Yeah, testing has been a
Well,
bottleneck, or
we can.
testing done right has been a bottleneck.
Yeah, but potentially, right? And so I think there's the question of there in certain areas there is something that can be the bottleneck. It's just it's not always one thing. And to get back to your question, realistically, you have this mode that you go through, and for me, I know that this is blocked on something. Like one project is blocked on me picking an actual name for it, or it's blocked on me registering with a third-party website. I have this SBB mobile app for public transportation replacement. I don't love the one that's released for the country, and so I want a different one. And so I've been programming this out. But at one point, you have to make a backend. And I was so focused on the mobile app, or I need to register with an OAuth 2 provider to get login experience done for SwissPass in order to even let users log in. And so you stop this. You're like, well, okay, I need to wait on that happening. Now, what do I do? Crud. Well, I have some other ideas. Let me start one of those. And so, you start the process again. And that would normally be fine, but tracking work across all of your different projects is very challenging. And I think this is one area where one of my teams is going to be investing a lot more in is like, if we build our own wrapper or harness, how does it well integrate with a issue management or epic flow for actually WIP tracking? Because if you have 10 things in progress, you never were able to know or remember which thing to go back to and be able to pick that up at the right time. And at this point, you just get lost.
Okay. But how is that different from the past where as a developer you were going on Jira, whatever ticketing system you were using, and then you will develop the feature. You will follow the epic, whatever, and then if you are not updating the ticket, then you are lost. So the good thing with AI is that you can force the agent to keep track of things in your ticketing system.
Yeah, you can certainly try. I understand what you're getting at here. I think the truth is that the way the models are constructed, no matter what I can do, and maybe someone has some good advice here, is there's always scope creep that comes into the model. It constantly expands what to do, and getting it to stay on track and scope it down is not just a technical problem or a process issue. I do find myself being encouraged to violate the scope and do more. And with that, then comes extra complexity. So not only do you have to be conscious of how to do the work and what the work is and how to do it correctly, you need to make sure you also stay on track. So you're taking over the responsibilities of people that usually were different roles in the company to ensure that a team is on target for actually delivering stuff. So yeah, for sure, historically it would still be a problem, but I feel like now there's not a good way to intercept this happening and really get a good sense of the direction the agent's going, get it to stop, get it, or understand the words that it's put out into a README or to do or your ticket, and understand that it has to be split in some way. I feel like they are very quickly to expand the scope in subtle ways that you don't really recognize. And then when it goes and implements the solution, it fixes one thing and creates 3 more feature bugs that the only way to fix those is by doing the actual work in those areas.
Interesting. So I think you have not really answered the question earlier.
Oh no.
That I had, the one that I asked you, like 10 questions ago. Like, do you see any benefit in your work? Do you see any impact in your work? Because we took a tangent about the agents are doing this and increasing the scope, and but because you keep using it, so so. So are you okay?
Well, that's the right question to ask. I don't know. I started thinking, if that paper from Microsoft, that back from Carnegie Mellon, that challenges the fact that we are losing critical thinking by using LLMs, is accurate, how do we evaluate this for our own internal use to know, am I degrading as a thinking, rational being and losing my edge, not just in software development, but sort of mentally? I think I really would like to start taking those tests maybe to understand, am I progressing in a particular way? What I will say is I haven't finished any of these projects yet. So as far as greenfield work, I think LLMs are the worst. Uh, if it's not short term, if it's not personal project, then like I just want to make this one change. I'm a Linux user. I want to convert my Puppet repository. I know I can't believe I had a Puppet repository to Ansible. And during that process, it kept on trying to convince me to use Nix and home config or something like that. And I kept on saying, but what about this use case? And it's just like, well, there's not really a solution for that. So you should still use Nix and home config. And so it was a constant fight there. And so even that wasn't particularly good. And I felt like that was a greenfield project. I think the areas where it is super effective that I do like, we'll say agentic development, is if as an engineer you've seen a problem, you know what the solution is, you even have strong opinions about what the implementation should be, you can very easily and quickly get the agent to do something, know where it did something wrong, see it in action making those changes, and then suggest an alternative. And I think you just avoided having to write the code. You're just now chatting at the LLM to do it. It still will do really bad things in what it wrote, but you can be like, wait, no, like that, you clearly shouldn't have done that. You wrote or true in this function. And it doesn't look like or true, but both statements are equivalently the same. And it doesn't know that the context of the calculation of those two things are the same. So it just threw that in there. You can catch those and you can fix it. But outside of that, I need to wait till I have a successful project.
But I mean, in your company, Authress, because the project that you talked about, are
Yeah.
they pet projects, personal pet
Yeah,
projects?
yeah, for
Okay.
sure. Those, well, almost all of them are for sure pet projects. Yeah,
Okay, so let's talk about in your company. I mean, you are the CTO of the company.
yeah,
Are you using those tools inside of company, or do you see that that it helps you going faster,
yeah.
catch problems?
So I think luckily we hired a bunch of people that have huge concerns about LLM usage. So we don't usually get into that failure mode as much. Like I said, there, if the thing is well designed already and people have strong opinions about the implementation, that it definitely helps there, no question. Another one it helps is if you're refactoring something, it does definitely help avoid copy paste errors and stuff like that. It is very good at keeping the context to get through the task without losing, like forgetting about like getting up, getting some water, coming back, and forgetting to change another method name or implementation. And since you already know what the change should be, it does it very well. So in those areas, when we're making changes to our open source libraries or targeted changes based off of feature requests or support tickets, those things tend to go really well, and definitely encourage using them. Outside of that, though, we haven't found another like clear win area, and I think that may be the important factor. If you are able to say or group the type of work into a particular category, like I just did, like this is a feature change, and it comes from this particular thing, and everyone has opinions about how it should go, and someone can just go and look at the code and know what it should be, or refactoring. Those are two examples. As long as you can decide and say, here's an example of where it should be used, I think there is positive use in using it. But if you just say software development globally, I think, and you aren't really specific about what the thing is that you're doing, I think very quickly is where it becomes a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Trying to use AI for everything basically is a problem usually.
Yeah.
But if you are intentional about where you can use and leverage the power, I think that is where you can get uh, a lot of benefits. Are you have you changed your methods of developing, or your SDLC completely, or your pipeline? Have you changed that, uh, or not?
Uh, there definitely is way more LLM use in building out CI/CD pipelines, because things like filtering error output, it does very well to understand the different complexities and generating actual meaningful report results there. So when there is a failure, you can be like, hey, I couldn't see this failure in the logs. Can you automatically write a script to detect failures in logs and report them like in big letters with bigger text and colors and everything, with lots of red X's, so that when someone's looking at the logs, they can easily see that problem. That's not the answer to your full question, though. Um,
You tend to not answer my questions.
yeah, I'm sorry.
There's a pattern.
Sorry, can you repeat for me where we're going with this?
We are going to. I was asking whether you took the opportunity to review your full
Oh,
SDLC.
yeah, sorry. So I think where the stage that we're currently at is we believe that our current processes are absolutely correct, and we're trying to bash existing LLMs into following that, which is a struggle. And as long as we can't do that, we're going to hesitate to do the full software development with them.
Okay. You alluded to using LLMs to capture some problems and so on. Have you tried? Have you tried DevOps agents, for example?
Not yet. I mean, there is an interesting question there, and I feel like we see another one of these AI SREs every week come out as a separate
Okay.
company, and I think
Yeah,
that's what the AWS DevOps agent does.
correct.
Uh, it would be interesting, honestly. I think there is an opportunity potentially. The thing is that one of our products, or at least the Authress product, focuses on high reliability, and so the likelihood of there being a issue in production is vanishingly small. And so finding issues before we get to the infrastructure layer, where we actually have running production code on it, isn't really it was where we focus all our time, like before we even merge the code. And so I don't know. I mean, maybe this is a clear win for this tool. Like I said, I haven't really tried it out, but a lot of the things we're thinking about happen at this stage rather than running it on our deployed stuff.
Got it. Okay, makes sense.
One of my biggest fears is that it doesn't know that it shouldn't roll back something because there's been a database migration or code changes. Like you can look at what has happened in the Git history, right? But actually making a determination is still a very complicated activity, and the risk is too high in a way, right? Like you can have metrics on it, and one of the early projects we tried to do was get it to evaluate. I think we were using Opus 4.5 at this point, to get it to evaluate the risk of a particular change and like try to understand. And it was just so abysmal at doing that. It ended the
Okay.
experiment basically for us, because we can't know at like before we make the change what the risk is. Our trust in having it automatically do something after the fact. I think a lot of the tools out there that are in this space, they're about like proposing fixes to the problem. And one of the concerns that we have is it doesn't necessarily encourage a deep thinking about the space, like to actually come back and do the root cause analysis and understand like why that happened. And if you just get a very easy like click to fix button, you may be tempted to skip the RCA process and not do it. And this is like goes back to it's all about what your processes are specifically. I think because we're in this weird space where we think about high reliability, we do the whole design up front, and we think about rolling it out, and whatever we roll out is has lots of safeguards in place. We don't end up in the situation where we're getting production issues that are easy to understand if you spend a lot of time reasoning about it. Most of the time it's like we don't even have enough logs to identify what this is. And I think that's one of the failure modes that a lot of the LLMs get into. I feel like the first thing that should always be done is add more logs. Like if you aren't able to say like very specifically the problem was this based off of these logs, then more logs is the right answer. But almost always the agents will get stuck in this infinite loop of like trying to fix this by suggesting an arbitrary thing and then executing on it and then testing and then not finding the result, whereas the result should have been add more logs, deploy to production, get a new log message, then run results and go from there. And until that happens, I feel like I'm a little bit hesitant.
Yeah, I think you mentioned two distinct things. First of all, the LLMs are not able to reason about the future or what could happen. And I think that's the whole thesis of Jan LeCun from Amy Labs. The fact that we need world models, so people for the AI to be able to anticipate and really identify problems, because LLMs have been trained on a corpus of data, and basically whatever scenario they can come up with are what they have read and
Mm.
what they've learned, but they are not able to reason completely about a particular problem that may happen. But what I think LM are pretty good at is to find the needle in the haystack, and as you pointed out, I mean, if you have a lot of logs, if you have your, your telemetry with all your open telemetry and everything, so you have your Splunk, Datadog, whatever open telemetry solution that Grafana that you have. And the AI can look at it and can read the logs. It is pretty good at finding a potential root cause for problems, and and that's the philosophy that we have with DevOps Agent. We connect that to different sources of information and different metrics, and then it finds the root cause for the problem. It doesn't try to solve the problem. It gives some potential solutions, but then the SRE or the DevOps engineer is looking at the report, and they decide what to do with this. So the decision is still with the human to proceed.
I will say one of the weird feelings that I get more so in the space with AWS fronted tools is I always trusted AWS with the primitives and less so with the applications that run on top. And I feel like in the current last couple of years, there's been a push to thinking about these first class applications. We see AWS Quick. There was always Q Developer. There's a whole suite of basically business applications. Those I feel like personally I trust less, and I think there's a question of where is the expertise on the AWS side that justifies building these things. I mean, obviously they have the engineers that are great and access to customers to do particular things. I think the serverless, the Lambda, the function as a service model was genius for exploding the platform up and getting the right people on. And right now, it just feels like they're trying to compete with other companies, but not really clear what the competitive advantage is. So I think I have the same concern with all of the AI SRE products. None of these companies have proven to me that they are able to make software reliable in a particular way that's strategic or fix problems in a very specific way. Otherwise, I think they would put their hands up and show some real important, valuable stuff. Like put your LLMs on a autonomous vehicle and have it completely solve the problem. If it can't do that, then there's going to be a huge problem. So I think I'll trust AWS DevOps agent as soon as it's running a car, completely driverless on the streets of, I think San Francisco is it. But I think Switzerland's a better example here, because in Switzerland, if it's car versus pedestrian, the car always stops. And I don't know if I trust an LLM today to actually decide, no, wait, I stop.
So I think the proof point that you're trying to get is, are we using DevOps agent internally
Oh
on
yeah, for sure.
so we are more and more using DevOps agent internally. The
Cool.
because that's important for us, and one of the core aspect of or belief of AWS is um, to operate at scale and be reliable. So that's what we want. So the primitives are still there, and we're still working on those primitives. And serverless is very important to us. Many customers are asking for more, and I'm actually excited about everything that the serverless team has released recently. So that's really
So
cool.
I think this is where there's a little bit of a disconnect potentially between companies that are, say, using a cloud provider and one of the hyperscalers. One of the things I have noticed with a lot of the LLMs is that hyperscalers tend to have their even own custom models because they have had just a sufficient amount of data to train on to even answer those particular questions. And there's a big difference between running a model that has only been trained on code that you found on Stack Overflow versus and JS Fiddle, and ones that have been trained on only the unfortunately Java in your case, or Go or C++ or whatever, that's inside your own organization. Of course, there's legacy stuff there and stuff doesn't work right, but the culture has permeated into the agent. Whereas the stuff that is in the open source LLMs or even the proprietary ones that are provided by the well-known providers, you have no idea what's gone into that. And so I think, this is where one of the struggles happens, is understanding where something that does work for AWS, it would be great to know like what the differences are between the setup that you've got and the one that other people would be potentially using. Like, are you using Kiro out of the box, or is everyone using these particular superpowers and these public skills to get stuff done and this configuration, and here are the logs format that AWS has, because we need these in this particular format in order to drive the DevOps agent to even find the issues in the first place, or we're using these particular tools and we just configured it like that. I think the devil is really a lot in the details there. And historically, I feel like we've seen that the hyperscalers can do a better job, or even I'll say a sufficient job, even when using particular LLM models. But the rest of the rest of us beyonds out there, we may struggle with the same thing because we don't have those same models, which I don't think AWS is really doing, but for sure the other hyperscalers are. They have private internal models that are driving things, and you talk to someone in an AI department at another, FANG company or whatever we're calling them today, and they're like, "Oh, LMs are great. We had this problem, and it solved this for me. It did all these reports." And you like try to do the exact same thing, and it doesn't work. And you're like, "No, I disagree with you." And like, "Oh yeah, that's true. We were using our own internal model there. I wonder if that influences the results we're getting."
Interesting. So I would have a series of interviews with senior principal engineers that are building those tools, and
Yeah.
I would ask the question. Are we? Do we have a different flavor? My understanding so far is that at least for Kiro, we have the same flavor. We have uh, most of our engineers are using Kiro CLI, to be honest, and I'm using mostly Kiro CLI to be and Kiro Web also now, um, to address the point of being able to have handoff. The,
Maybe that will solve all my problems. Stop using an IDE. Switch to the terminal version. That's always better. I mean, there is this question. I mean, I think these are where the opportunities are. You mentioned that building custom agents out. Like, I'm wondering if there's an integration with Strands that works better here than the models that are being used under the hood. But maybe this is my lack of understanding with Kiro. You only pretty much get the auto option, which doesn't let you specify sub agents, doesn't let you even specify the main agents or the system prompts for any of them. It just goes to town and you have no control over it.
No, no. With custom agents, so you can define the way you want and which model is used, which LLM is used per custom model, and then you have your system prompt per custom agent. So you have full flexibility on that.
So is the suggestion when using Kiro to hook up like AWS Bedrock to integrate with
No,
them?
no. So with Kiro, you don't have access to you can't steer Kiro to a particular LLM provider. So
Uh-huh.
you have to use the models that are exposed by Kiro, but you
Right.
can select. So you don't have to default to auto. You can force. Oh, I want to use IQ for this task, or I want to use Sonnet, or I use. So you can really define the one that you want.
Yeah, but there's like 10 in the list and that's it. And I don't think system, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, that like you can control the system prompt there, which I think would be a huge win as far as configurability goes.
So you have user prompts that you can define, or system prompts that you can define at the custom level. But we do have our own system prompts as well in Kiro, because to inform Kiro about our knowledge base, which is
Yeah.
trained on the AWS knowledge and so on. So we do have our system prompts, but you can add yours as well, and that's what I'm doing to really specify what my subagents are doing.
So I think it's those sorts of things where in practice you can see a huge disparity between someone who writes a blog post saying how great everything was and doesn't talk about the internal implementation versus what someone else has to deal with. And I think that's where the devil is for sure in the details, but also an opportunity because and this is sort of what I think that we've started to realize more and more is a lot of the software development process that we have was great because of certain expectations or flows individuals had, or reasoning about certain areas. And there was always value in capturing it and sharing it, but this makes it required to capture and share it. So when you realize that you have an expectation about how a particular function is written or naming for stuff, when you are able to articulate that into a file or a skill or a steering document or into a prompt, you get something that is more aligned with that in some way and avoids the pitfalls that you know exist with it. And I think this is where there's not a lot of people standing up and saying like it's not just one skill to solve, deployment of this open source technology. It's really like how I think about things. And when you do see one article here and there about like, oh, here's my skill for handling Rust or JavaScript or whatever. But I think there's another level on top of that of like how we even think about doing software development. And it's in there, it's in the model, it's being executed. But I think rarely people are thinking about how do we holistically think about controlling the models to get out what we want.
Yeah. So it's funny because I have a talk about that. So the one time I had to postpone again, that was my talk. But yeah, we can. I will produce the a blog post about that because I got good feedback and I'm getting good performance as well out of it. The the But yeah, so I think to broaden what you just said, inside of Amazon, we have a bunch of engineers that are working in a team called ASBX. We are responsible for the developer experience inside of Amazon, and they have created this AI fluency program that helps us scale through the org and enable all the engineers on some of those practices that you describe are missing. So we need probably a scanning mechanism as well to go external with that knowledge.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is one of the challenges that has come up more and more for many organizations. I know this is something that we started looking at more is it was always the case that you sort of had to document. And this is just doubling down on clear communication and expectations within organizations. And I say this, maybe it's like an obvious thing to a lot of people, but there are so many companies out there that don't even have a well defined, say, career ladder. And now their career ladder just has a single line on it that says must use at least 100,000, tokens worth of per day or whatever their metric is. Like that's how they're evaluating people's success. And I mean, that's a little bit of a joke, but a lot of companies don't have a career ladder or don't have values defined on how they actually do software development. It's encapsulated in the way that their teams are organized or thinking that how they approach certain problems, how they approach their own business space. And I think that's a huge win to realize that and lean on it as a success that we have. Uh, and how does that translate to the world that we potentially are going to?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. One of our large customer who has deployed Kiro in Switzerland, they have they spent probably the first month working on that governance, and they really spent the time to put together the AI registry and capturing their best practices, good practices, their mental model for working for their security, rules and so on. So um, and I think it goes back to what I said earlier about you don't build AI on top of your existing workflows. You need to rethink. You need to get ready for that. It's not just a license to get. So it's not oh, I need a Copilot license or Kiro license or Cloud Code license, and suddenly everything is going to be magically solved. You really need to do some engineering work. So first of all, you need to understand how those tools are working, and then you create everything that goes around that, so to be successful. And yeah, it takes some time, and you need to have uh, the practice in place to be able to enable that in your organization.
Well, see, that's the thing is, I don't know that a tool is not going to solve a person problem, right? Like having the tool introduced, won't even be able to do it, even if you tell them like, oh, well, you still need to do this thing. I mean, some large companies will take out a huge loan against their future to, maybe potentially make that switch if they realize there's an opportunity. But I think most of them aren't looking at it that way or don't fully understand it. And I think the providers on the opposite side are in this opposite problem where they're trying to make something either configurable or not configurable on the spectrum, and it's not necessarily the same levers that organizations or users want, right? I ask questions about like, well, I want to control the system prompt or whatever, and I think this is a historical pain point with a lot of providers where the system prompt that's being provided by model providers is wildly different than the ones that you want. Just as a common example that we often run into when we're using stuff, the one in Claude Code is bias for action and never make git commits. And I'm here saying, no, I want everything committed all the time because that's a log. Actually, what we do is we have the agents automatically commit as much as possible and include a summary of the information in the commit so that when you look back over the history, and when I say you, I mean the agent, when it starts up next time, it can already look at the last 1,000 commits and say, hey, look, here's an optimized context for what was changed already. I don't need to look at the code to make these decisions and make questions about it or what the business logic was. It's already summarized here. And I find that on the other one is just also atrocious, a bias for action. It's like you're having a conversation about like, why is this wrong? Like, what does this even mean or whatever? And in the middle of the conversation, the agent says, oh, right, you're totally correct. I don't know what
Let
I
me
was
change.
thinking. I should make everything different, and then just goes off and does it. I'm like, wait a second. My question was like, why is this a 2 instead of a 3? And all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, I don't know what to do here. Do I cancel the agent, like stop immediately, or do I let it go? Maybe it was on a different thread and I'll question it later. And it's not clear really how to approach those situations. But I didn't want to get in that in the first place. And I find that this is one of those weird flexible areas where I think the biggest challenge here is that the model providers want to make money, and so they're introducing the system prompts in a way which sort of guarantee that. So much so that if you try to hack changing the system prompt, they'll ban your account. Providers do ridiculous things. It's because of money, pricing, system prompts. It's all of it. Can we do better? Probably. It's all about control.
Control for the users, giving control to the
Yeah.
users. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a long-term question here. Is it sustainable to run a business in this way that people will pay for that also gives them the control? Because the control is only offered on the enterprise plans for a lot of these providers. And that's a price point that works for the provider, but doesn't usually work for a lot of the customers. So much so that we're already seeing companies go out and try to subvert getting on the enterprise plan. Like there's like some limit, like you're allowed to have max plans for your entire organization on Claude, but above 150 people or so, you have to take an enterprise plan. So you pretend you're like 5 organizations and you just get the max plan for all of the people in each of your 5 organizations, and they're not sharing it and whatever, and you hook up to all the same MCPs or same tools, etc. It never knows the difference, and you don't have to pay the ridiculous 5 times extra pricing on top of it. If you see people trying to do this to get around blocks in your product, it tells you your pricing mechanism is not correct.
Probably, yeah. um we so we talk about a bunch of things. You mentioned earlier strange agents. So what was it for building your custom agent where you have full control on the way you want to them to interact with your code?
Actually, it's for doing the software development itself. So, like I said, because we feel like that the control is going to be still retained by whatever the IDE provider is, even Kiro or whatever the harness is, that there is an opportunity here for organizations to embed their expectations of their software development process transparently in a tool. And we want to see if we can recreate that to see if what really is the problem? Is it how we do software development? Are we doing software development well, or is that not a competitive advantage? And it doesn't matter how you do software development. It doesn't matter if you take anti-gravity or Codex or Hero and you just go to town, and it may not feel appropriate or a perfect match. But what if the way you do software development, the problems that come out of that, that are distilled from that, the production issues, your ability to solve business problems or even think about stuff, is heavily tied to the collective understanding or processes that your organization has? There is some middle ground here. It's not just about doing the coding. It's about how you do, WIP tracking or issue management or KPI creation. There's a whole flow here, I think, that can be connected and delivered upon. And right now, I think all of the agents and LLM providers and IDEs really focus just on the software creation piece.
Yeah. So that's very true, and exactly the topic I'm addressing with customers, how to go beyond that, and because that's just one piece, and it's not necessarily. I mean, looking holistically at your process is probably the right path. Um, so yeah, we do we do have customers who are and inside of Amazon also, who are some teams that are building their own agents with strengths, or using tools like Pi, which is a really good solution as well, very composable, so that you can use. Have you
So
used
for the
it?
record, we actually aren't even using strands because it only supports Python and TypeScript.
Yes. And what is your language? Mm,
Well, we thought
Romain.
holistically, if we're going to build something that needs to be performant, what language are you going to pick? And then everyone stands up and says, "Oh, it's got to be Rust, of course." So uh, we did the gauntlet and we found one. I think it's called Rig. Am I thrilled about it? No, I'd much prefer to use the AWS version of it. But and then the suggestion was maybe we should just create an open source project that just duplicates the AWS Strands SDK into Rust and host that. And I'm like, you know what? I love this. Instead of us working on the business value, which could be, a harness which we could sell to potentially other companies if we wanted to, we're going to work on the open source thing that's a clone of something else. Like this, just shaving the yak, right?
Yeah. um, Keros AI is built in Rust.
Amazing.
Yeah. So okay. The any closing remarks about everything we talked about? The future is bright.
So I'm a self-proclaimed LLM cynic. Well, I should say reservist, pessimist, realist. But after anyone listening to this episode will probably think that I'm a super huge optimist. I think this is sort of the problem where it's that if I say even one good thing, then all of a sudden I'm put in this other extreme uh, camp basically. And it's weird because there's just so many things here where I feel like there's opportunities for improvement and things that can be done well. And I think we will see potential changes like forever in the future. One of the questions that maybe I'll leave it with maybe two ending facts. The first one is I wonder if there's a world where LLMs go completely away, and I think the answer is no. So that's some food for thought there. And the other one is I'm still looking for a podcast guest who has a roadmap from like next quarter, next year, next 5 years, started using LLMs and was able to say, it destroyed our roadmap. All those things we were going to do 5 years from now, we already got them done, because I haven't heard that yet.
Ah, I think I will have a guest soon. I will share the contacts because they have been doing that, and they even wrote about a book about it. So
Cool.
quite interesting. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of companies say that they're experiencing productivity improvements, but they're not actually pushing out a lot of new stuff that customers have asked for. And if you aren't solving parts of your roadmap or be able to point to, if you're 100 times more productive, shouldn't you have 100 times more revenue? And I don't run into a lot of people that say that.
That's exactly so. Every time I start my presentation at customers, I say, okay, so we have surveys that shows, I mean, DORA and so on, that 93% of developers are using AI and claim that they feel more productive at the individual level. But then I ask, okay, do you see any impact on your top line? And say, no, no. So actually, only 4% of enterprise are actually seeing benefits of using AI. So that's disconnect, and that's how we can dive deeper into the why and some of the recipes that are that those companies are using that are working for them. So, but yeah, definitely. Some companies are able to do that. So I would have this gentleman coming soon on the podcast explaining how to do that at scale. It's a big company, so but
Cool.
yeah, it's quite interesting. But yeah, it's I think it's in everyone's mind at the moment. All the CTOs I talk to, yeah, they all have the same concerns.
I just have been just ignoring it. Like I don't care. It doesn't. It probably isn't happening. Or if it is, there's something special. Or maybe you need to be building your own models. It could be any one of those things potentially. Maybe you have to be paying a lot of money for it before you even get to the point where it makes sense. I'll go back to what I said at the beginning, that I don't think software development was ever the bottleneck. And so unless you're solving non-software development related problems with it, then I don't see there can really be a logical return.
I mean, we can expand on that. I mean, what is strictly software development? I think there's a big human aspect to it, where you have to wait until, I mean, you have to wait for information, you have to wait for on other teams, on your QA, if you have QA, if they deliver well, if you have product management, if you have operations. So there's a lot of handoffs that we know are taking a lot of time. So looking at those is already all those interactions, and see, okay, how can we think differently, the way we are organized, the way we operate, and can AI could be an operating system where we can facilitate the discussions to speed up things and move faster. And from there, I think we see that there are some real tangible benefits that comes out of it.
Well, this is the thing, as I wonder if what people are seeing are they're just now transparent to the problems that were there all along. A long time ago, early 2000s, agile and lean manufacturing got married and had a child called lean software development, and that is basically the aspect of identifying the wastes in your process and eliminating
Yes.
them. Handoff is a waste, and so companies for sure were out there saying, wait a second, we have this release engineering button push manual action here. Maybe we're making code and we're deploying it to customers, but no one's using it. That's inventory waste, where we have it in our warehouse and no one's using it. And there's ones for each one of these. And so like that was already a thing. But I think maybe it took LLMs to be thrown in our face before more companies have realized where their actual wastes are. And so like it's not an LLM problem. It's not even a tech problem at all. It's a wait, we have a terrible thing. I like the idea that companies can move a lot faster uh, if they solve these problems. Maybe the improvements that companies are seeing because of LLMs are incorrectly attributed to them.
Maybe the I think a great book that everyone should read, again, for those who have read that, is The Phoenix Project.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's my
What
closing
if
thought.
what if Brent was an LLM?
Yes. Yeah. But how would he interact with Eric? That would be the big question. I don't know. I don't know.
There's a lot of great things in that book. The number one that I always think about, which I feel like is highly underrated, is the security engineer uh, who would go in meetings and request a lot of things get changed and never have anything be implemented, because later they found out that finance already had an insurance policy against failures within their business, that they didn't need to fix those vulnerabilities because insurance already covered it. And that's why those things never needed to be done in the first place. And once he did that, he threw away this giant book of all these security vulnerabilities and was like, it's okay if we're vulnerable. It doesn't impact the bottom line.
That's a good one, indeed. All right, a few closing questions. Besides the Phoenix project, do you have a book to recommend?
On the spot here. Uh, every single episode of our podcast, I force the guest to bring something, and I've run out of all my book recommendations such a long time ago. But I actually do have one. Well, I haven't read that, so I don't know if I can recommend that one. I will say, and the Phoenix Project is definitely a good pick there. Just because it came up to me recently, there's a book by Lev Grossman called The Magicians. Uh, Science fiction fantasy, and I think it's actually done pretty well. I will say the show is a little bit better. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I will. There are some aspects of the show which are very well done, but the book is equally well done.
Okay, is it a series? No,
Yeah,
show.
there's a bunch of books. I don't remember how many there are, and there's like 6 seasons or something of the show.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So,
It's a
what
lot
is
of
your
content.
favorite? Yeah, what is your favorite dev tool that you have discovered lately? It's not Kiro, apparently. Okay, that's fine.
Oh, wow. I am so not prepared to answer that question. You're gonna make me dig deep here. Something, a dev tool that it's been so long since I've done like just straight out full service software development that I'm honestly not even sure what I would want to say here. Uh, I mean, honestly, I think recently I think is the part that's tripping me up, because there haven't been a lot of things. But I will say I have always been a huge fan of GitLab compared to GitHub. I think one of the most important things is the software development lifecycle. If I haven't harped on that enough in this episode, and I think that it has a much better flow and clarity of what's going on than a giant platform that has been dedicated since its beginning to open source. So I think there's a huge different aspect there, and so much so that I don't think I've talked to anyone that has used both of them and has recommended GitHub over GitLab. And maybe that's just my network, my circle. But if you are debating on CI/CD to use, it would be that. Now, because they made the mistake of coming out a few months ago saying we're going to convert everything we're doing to also support AI and do AI software development, a lot of people have been leaving that platform and starting to, I mean, literally because GitHub is under fire. A lot of people were moving to GitLab, and they all they had to do is keep their mouth shut. But instead, they opened it and said, "We're going to be AI first." And so, I think a lot of people are starting to explore a project that was forked off of Git, I believe, called Forgejo, as an open source, supports federated authentication for repo management. And I don't know if it's in our future, but it's definitely the next thing on my list that I'm interested in checking out.
Good. Okay. Um, what are you going to learn next or dive deeper on?
So I've been personally experimenting with this whole harness setup, seeing whether or not you can actually have a good software being designed if you are in control of your own harness and not just using what's out there. And maybe it will make a huge impact. And I think there's some aspects with how you do the software development that are super important and how the code is written, because it's something like there was an article not too long ago that said like 80% of all the costs of using LLMs is spent fixing bugs. And that tells us we should spend so much more time not writing a spec, but just writing better code.
Yeah.
Maybe that means writing a spec, but there is this question of what that is, and I keep questioning like what is the optimal amount of software that we should be writing per unit time, because if we can keep going faster, there must be some upper limit. Speed of light, I don't know. But I don't think anyone's asking this question. For our organization, for our product that we're building, should we be making fast software faster, or should we be making it software slower? How does this align? If we use a corollary of how CPUs are built, you want all of the buffers for all of the registers to be done at the same time. If one of them is slower, then you have to slow down your entire process while you wait for that operation to complete, and you want all the registers to happen on the same clock cycle. So you do a lot of tricks, and I think software development is one of those things. Making it faster doesn't necessarily eliminate the bottleneck.
Yeah. Totally agree. And final question: Who should I get on the show next? What would you recommend?
I worry about this being public if if I throw someone under the bus here. Oh, there's so many different directions you could go here. I like technical CTOs, like not ones that are hands-on everything, but ones that are spending some time, and not the ones that just made a startup company and are just trying to shill their product out. It'd be interesting to see ones from some of the larger open source pieces of technology. I'm still trying to get someone from Cilium on my podcast in that area, because I think what's happening at Linux under the hood is interesting opportunities for improvement. And given how widespread use, unfortunately, Kubernetes is, it's hard to avoid it.
So we did not discuss about Kubernetes this time, but maybe next time.
Oh, I have
Thank-
nothing good to say about it.
All right. On that note, we are going to close. Thank you so much, Romain, to have joined me on this one. I'm glad that we could make it finally.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite, and we got to talk a lot about Kira, which I was totally not prepared to discuss.
That's all good. That's all good. But good, some great takeaways that I would bring to the service team anyway. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.